Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be giving you some recommendations if you like the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This is not to say that these books are as good as Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. It's not even to say that they necessarily even have the same character types or the same plot points. It's more just to say like there's certain aspects of the vibe in that trilogy that are captured in these books, and that's why I recommend them. So don't necessarily take this as like these are exactly like First Law, because there is nothing like First Law. I've read a lot of grimdark fantasy and none of it quite reaches the genius of the First Law trilogy and the broader world as well, of course. But these recs are really for people who are looking for that little bit of extra something and want something that's witty, snarky, quite sarcastic, but also like quite deep, but also something that's dark and also has some very interesting themes. Some of these you might have heard me mention before, but I've had quite a few new subscribers recently, so I thought I would do a much more updated version. I have 5 books on this list, and without further ado, let's jump in. The first one I have on this list is Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. Jay Kristoff and Joe Abercrombie's writing style is quite different, but I have to say I think the humour is similar-ish. I think Joe Abercrombie's humour is a lot more witty and it's very sarcastic, it's very British, and that's part of the reason why I love his books so much. Whereas Empire of the Vampire, the humour is a bit more simplistic, but it's still highly enjoyable. I think as well, our main character in Gabriel de Leon, he has certain parallels to some of the characters, particularly Logan, Nine Fingers in First Law. They share some pretty similar character traits in my opinion. Again, Logan will always be my favourite character of all time. Nobody will ever beat him. Gabriel de Leon though, he's definitely up there in one of my top 10 favourite characters of all time because I just adore his arc and I just adore him as a character. They are different. They are very, very different in many ways, but I think they share certain key traits that make them kind of relatable to each other, and I think for that reason it's worth picking up Empire of the Vampire. My only kind of warning of Empire of the Vampire is a bit cheesier, at least for a Brit, because like I said, Joe Abercrombie is known for his very dry, sarcastic humour, whereas I think American humour is a bit more obvious. I don't mean to say that in like a bad way or anything, but that's what I've noticed like whenever I go to the US or I speak to people from America, that it's less nuanced, I would say, than British humour. Like half the time Brits make jokes and you don't even know because it's that sarcastic. So whereas in the US that just doesn't happen. So I would say the humour is a bit more obvious, but it's still enjoyable, and both also are just an absolute wild ride and there's so much happening. There's a great secondary cast of characters too. And I think if you love First Law, then you have to give Empire of the Vampire a try. Next up, we have a sci-fi book, and that is The Will of the Many by James Islington. The reason why I mentioned this one, and neither of these are completed, by the way, so just keep that in mind that my opinion might change as both series progress. But I think with The Will of the Many, it's just so well paced, and there's a lot of politics, and there's a lot of things happening at a macro level that I think also applies to First Law. First Law is such an intimate character study, but it also has this broader macro landscape that we don't fully get the scope of until much later on in the series. And I would say the same is happening right now in The Will of the Many by James Islington. So I think if you're one of those people that likes really intimate character studies, but also having like a big political backdrop that at least in The Will of the Many hasn't fully revealed itself, and I'm very excited to see it reveal itself, I think you're going to enjoy that kind of trying to figure out what is really happening, because what we're being told isn't necessarily the truth, and we as the reader kind of have to deduce where this is going. And I love that. It's one of my favourite things about First Law, is us not being presented with the bigger picture and having to also figure things out. That also happens in The Will of the Many. So definitely check that out if you enjoy that. Then we have a grimdark author that I adore, and I'm really keen to read more of his books this year, and that is A City Dreaming by Daniel Polanski. And the only reason why I recommend this is the vibe. Like the vibe is very Abercrombie-esque. It's just like the humour. Our main character is very kind of, he's a bit ridiculous, but like you still really like want him to win. And he's he's just like a fun time to be around. And I think Abercrombie's characters obviously have a lot more depth, also because they have an entire trilogy to grow over, whereas A City Dreaming is only one book. But the characters, I think, have parallels in the sense that they're people that are very morally grey, but you are still rooting for them and you still want them to succeed. I also really like the humour in Polanski's books in general, but I think in this one it really shines. It's just the vibe. And vibe, unfortunately, is not something that you can really describe. It's just the feel that I remember when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is reminding me of Abercrombie, and I love it for that reason. It is a standalone, so you can read it very quickly. It's very short. It's a fun time. Take my word for it. Then we have The Company by KJ Parker. I haven't mentioned KJ Parker on my channel for a while for some reason. I'm going to be reading some KJ Parker in the coming months, which I'm really excited about. But The Company, without a doubt, bar maybe The Folding Knife, is one of my favourite KJ Parker books. It's one of my favourite books of all time. It is just an absolute masterclass in like human psychology, and I think that also applies to First Law. Part of the reason, or one of the many reasons why I love First Law, is a lot of those characters actually feel very real, and they feel like actual people you could know in your actual day-to-day life. Maybe not necessarily to the extremes that are presented, but like certain character traits that they have, like at least for me, remind me of people in my own life and also remind me of myself. And that is also the same in The Company, because this is a book about kind of the old gang getting back together. They're a group of soldiers, ex-soldiers, getting back together to go and basically create the Republic on this island, to create this very kind of utopian society. But naturally things going completely awry, and it's just really fascinating to read. And I think that also applies to First Law. I think the characters all have their own motivations. We don't really know what they are. We all know something isn't right, but we don't know what. And I get that same feeling whenever I read First Law or any book by Abercrombie. So definitely check that one out. It's also a standalone, very character driven, quite dark. It's just phenomenal. And then the last one I have is maybe a little bit left field, because again, it's more just the feeling that I got from it when I read it that made me feel like if you like Abercrombie, you will like this author and this particular book. And that is The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. I've talked about this book so much on my channel because I love it so much. It's one of my favourite fantasy books of all time. It's just so good. The main character, Kazaril, or Kaz for short, is just, again, he reminds me of Logan, and because Logan is one of my favourite characters of all time, whenever I find a character that reminds me of Logan, I just get attached to that character. I've always liked that character type, even before I liked First Law. So it's always been like a common theme for me, something that I've always really enjoyed. But reading Kaz in this book, like, it just took me back to when I first met Logan and when I first met the characters in the First Law world. I think if you like the character of Logan and you like that character type, then I strongly recommend reading this book purely just so that you can experience Kaz. This is a one book. I think it's called The World of the Five Gods. I think there's like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 books, but they're all like kind of like standalones from what I understand. And this one, you definitely can read it as a standalone, because I believe the next book follows one of the other characters who's not a main character, she's a side character in this book, and then I think the series really takes off from there. So this one you can definitely read as a standalone, and that's exactly what I did. And it's one of those books that I'm going to reread again and again and again because it just feels so magical. It's got like a medieval setting as well, which I think First Law, at least the original trilogy, definitely has in places. And yeah, again, it's more like the feeling that it evoked for me rather than there necessarily being shared tropes or story points or anything like that. But like I said, if you love Logan, you're going to really enjoy Kaz. So there we have it. I'm going to do another part of this, specifically as it relates to First Law, because I have a bunch more recommendations, but I wanted to just go through a few that I have mentioned before just for newer subscribers. So keep an eye out for that. And I'm going to be doing more videos like this. Like if you like this book, this series, this author, then I'm going to recommend you this book, this series, this author. Because I really like these types of books and I don't think there's tons of them on the internet. So I'm going to do more going forward. If there's any specific books, authors, tropes that you want me to cover, please let me know down below in the comments. If you also have any recommendations, don't hesitate to let me know down below. I love hearing your guys' thoughts on these sorts of things as well. And yeah, I'll see you down below. Thanks for watching, folks. Please give this video a thumbs up and I'll see you in my next video. Take care and I will speak to you soon. Bye.